Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And after I did my live stream on Peter Mandelson's sacking this morning, I then see a report. Morgan McSweeney, yet again, has his fingerprints all over this latest political fiasco. It seems it was he who advised Starmer to back our scandal-prone ambassador yesterday. Morgan McSweeney clearly has skills, but running an effective government operation is not one of them. He's too expensive for Keir Starmer and for Labour, and it seems clear that Labour will not stop scoring political own goals until McSweeney is replaced with some competent advisors. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So politics is brutal. I mean, anyone who gets involved at the sharp end of politics cannot complain. You know what it is. And political commentators, of course, can be savage because we're the classic backseat drivers, aren't we? We can be wise after the event and say, oh, it's ridiculous, you shouldn't have done that. But I always try to be fair, right? People have been calling for McSweeney to go for a very long time. Myself, I've said from the start, he was a poor chief of staff. But I'm not so harsh as to describe him as useless or a liability. I don't need to make it personal. I just think he's a victim of the Peter principle. It's a classic case of ending up in a senior role for which you are not competent on the basis of having been highly competent in a more junior but very different role. Morgan McSweeney is clearly a good campaign manager, but he's a very bad political advisor. Worse, he's filled 10 Downing Street with like-minded people. Now, I said at the election, Starmer must avoid the pitfalls of groupthink. Do not fill your top team, even if they're all brilliant, even if they're all the cleverest people in the country, right? Don't fill your top team with people who all think alike, because people who think alike are even if they're good critical thinkers, they're naturally less critical of their own thinking. So if everyone else thinks the same, they're also less critical of everyone else's thinking. Yet this is exactly what McSweeney has done. But it's a double whammy because he's surrounded 10 Downing Street with people who are not critical of one another, but also aren't the greatest minds available to the government. Not only are they of too similar mind, leading to insufficient challenge to their ideas, they don't even understand the basics of the political arts. They've made too many mistakes. They're campaigners. They're not political operatives. Now, the two things have crossover. There's overlap there, but they are not the same thing. Yesterday, Keir Starmer defended Peter Mandelson in Parliament. Now, I said in the stream earlier, I do not criticise Mandelson's appointment even now. Yes, it's true that scandal follows him around like flies around shit, right? But think about where Starmer was last autumn. Trump had just been elected. Donald Trump was openly critical, angry about Labour staffers taking time off to campaign for Kamala Harris. He argued that the Labour Party were campaigning against him. Musk, who was super close to Trump at the time, had picked a fight with Starmer personally last summer. So, you think about the position Starmer's in, everything's set up to have a disastrous relationship with the White House. An awful prospect at any time, but with the additional responsibilities of a geopolitical shit show in Ukraine and Gaza to deal with, the idea of not having a good relationship with the White House, unthinkable. He needed a Trump whisperer, someone who could charm Trump as well as his inner circle. Mandelson, absolutely ideal for the role. And hindsight has shown that he did the job. There'll be people saying he never should have hired him in the first place. Well, he did the job, but the cost got too much. And when the cost became too much, what Starmer needed to do was to have cut his losses 24 hours earlier. I said in the stream, Starmer needed to make the decision before PMQs yesterday. He needed to know whether this would blow over. Only if confident do you defend Mandelson in Parliament. So now, for the second week in a row, Starmer has defended someone who had to fall on their sword shortly afterwards. For 2 weeks in a row, Starmer has gifted Kemi Badenoch with an easy ride on her own turbulent journey. I know I've said we need the Conservatives to do better to bring Reform UK down to earth, but not at Labour's expense. And here's the thing, a couple of weeks ago, Starmer was saying, right, we're entering phase 2 of the government. The reason for saying that is technically they are, I suppose, entering a genuine phase 2, But the reason for saying that was to try and get people to go, look, let's forget about what happened before, because they knew that they were going to have to front load with all the costs. The point was that from now on, we can start to get some of the benefits from that cost. Now, the Rayner thing, nothing to do with McSweeny, nothing to do with Starmer. That's just one of those things. Couldn't be helped. But the Peter Mandelson thing is something that has been made a hit against Labour because of Morgan McSweeney's advice. And as I say, so I do that live stream this morning. I didn't know this at the time. I did the live stream. And then I see that Sam Coates of Sky is reporting something. Morgan McSweeney was the one who backed Mandelson when Starmer was reportedly hesitant. So I'm thinking, oh, shit, not again. It was McSweeney who urged Starmer to defend him in Parliament yesterday. So we're getting into this situation now. There's two parts to what Sam Coates is claiming here. First, McSweeney is the one who urged Starmer to back Mandelson. But then we're also getting that Starmer had his doubts about it. So we're getting into a situation where Starmer, who's not a political beast, right? His political instincts sound like they're better than McSweeney's, and yet he's trusting McSweeney. Not for the first time, Keir Starmer has trusted McSweeney, and it's bitten him on the arse. I mean, if you think about it, where Starmer is going wrong as Prime Minister is not in terms of his work as Prime Minister. Like, if you think about his international work, that's going well. It's not in terms of his direction of policy. That's working out well. It's in taking McSweeney's advice. Like I say, I'm not about dogpiling or anything. I'm not into witch hunts, right? And there are some people in Labour who have an axe to grind against McSweeney, not because of his performance, because of other things, right? And I'm not into that. But he's not up to the job. He's proving far too expensive as Starmer. And he was showing that he was not up to the job straight away. It's not like I'm coming to this conclusion now. I was saying last autumn he's not up to the job. It's been evident from day one. For anyone who wants to avoid a shit show at the next election, McSweeney's too expensive. I mean, let's just widen the angle on this picture a little bit. Take a look at a few things. So Keir Starmer walks into Downing Street promising grown-up politics. A year later, the grown-ups are bickering. The polls are tanking. The whispers have turned into open shouting. The alarm bells are ringing. Morgan McSweeney, he used to be the guy with the oil can, so he was keeping all the cogs of the Labour machine humming as they worked in opposition to overturn a historic 2019 defeat and turn it into a historic victory. These days, he's more like a guy handing out flat pack instructions that nobody can follow. Insiders say he keeps telling Starmer to stay in manager mode. Spreadsheets, no fireworks, right? You know, they're the sort of autocrat. It's not working. Welfare reform, McSweeney reportedly urged the PM to hug the Treasury line. Result, Labour MPs voted to completely wreck that disability bill, while claiming they're still the caring party, of course. A junior minister summed it up. He's running the 1997 playbook in a 2025 world. You know, when your wizard becomes a meme for dithering, that is flag number one. Most of the public think the government are doing poorly. Right? Labour could manage this if the alternative was the Tories. Electoral strategy used to require just be more obviously better than the alternative. But Reform UK have changed the playbook, haven't they? Morgan McSweeney still hasn't updated his copy. Dig into the crosstabs in the coalition that elected Starmer. It's hemorrhaging. You know, the under 35s, that's down quite significantly since spring. Leave seats in the Midlands and Wales down. Private renters down. You know, all of these key groups that Labour did so well in opposition to win over, they're now losing. Focus groups in Stoke called the government grey blancmange. Keir the accountant who can't balance the books. That was another phrase that came out. What's the response from inside number 10? Another strategy deck titled Hold the Line. Carry on doing the wrong thing. Just carry on doing it, brazen it out. Because that worked well for Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, didn't it? You know, telling the Prime Minister to keep blaming the Tory inheritance. Problem with that is the Tories are not the alternative now. Blaming the Tories doesn't work because voters think Reform UK are the alternative. In fact, this is where Downing Street thinking is disjointed because they know Reform UK is their rival at the next election. They clearly know that because whenever they throw out any attack lines, it's increasingly against Reform UK. They don't even really mention the Conservatives except when they have to. And they've been open about it as well. They openly recognise that Reform UK are their rivals. But they're still running strategies if it's the Tories. There's no joned up thinking. You know, the Tories' record doesn't help Labour against Reform UK. McSweeny is a good organiser, but he's not a strategist. How many more scandals with his fingerprints on it does Starmer need before he sees that? Then you take the winter fuel allowance. The Treasury slashed it for millions of pensioners. Then you had a disastrous local election campaign because of it, right? That was the number one issue cited. Backbenchers revolted, created a U-turn that all but torched Labour's reputation for competence. Now, the U-turn does give them the chance to win back support now, but they didn't need to lose it in the first place. A competent political strategy operation in number 10 would have blocked the obviously self-defeating move in the first place. So although this was a problem caused by the Treasury, it was number 10's fault for not applying the political filter. So that means they don't have one. Reform UK is running very close with Labour in quite a lot of seats, especially in the so-called Red Wall. Farage's social media team is slicing Starmer's manager mode clips next to pensioners shivering in unheated living rooms. The managerial image isn't working for Starmer. You know, you do smash cuts to Nigel raising a pint then, don't you? The message here is Westminster's broken, only Nigel listens. You know, constituency chairs in Stoke, Lee, Blythe, the same canvassers hear the winter fuel tale and the welfare row, right? That's what was being talked about as they entered the local elections before the doorstep foot even hit the mat. That was the first thing canvassers were getting blasted with: winter fuel allowance, welfare cuts. There was always a sense in which Labour were going to struggle in their first year because change genuinely does take time. But the public are impatient. They've been promised improvements to their lives ever since the banking crisis. They've run out of patience. Don't blame them. So Labour are always going to have to ride that storm out, but they're not doing it. Not just because they've failed to put out a positive message, although that is a serious failing, but they've committed cardinal sins. Labour would not be doing this badly if the public just thought they weren't improving things quickly enough. It's because they think Labour are actively making things worse in their eyes. The winter fuel shit show, the disability cuts mess. That was making things worse. Having peaceful protesters arrested, now defending a dodgy character one day only to sack them the next. It looks like you're out of control. It looks like you don't know what you're doing. You know, and it also, in terms of Mandelson, makes it look like it was done due to political pressure, which obviously it was. But in politics, you have to be ahead of the game so you can look like you're making these decisions for the right reasons. Michael Heseltine used to say, it's a disparaging comment about Boris Johnson, he's the sort of person who looks to see which way the crowd is running, then runs ahead of them and yells, "Follow me," right? Okay, you're calling out cynical behaviour, but it's also political behaviour. That's how you need to be as a politician. McSweeny has his fingerprints on all of these unforced errors. Starmer relies on him because he recognises that he is not a political apex predator. But neither is McSweeny. Starmer desperately needs to move McSweeny out of government altogether. I'm perfectly happy with him being in charge of Labour's campaigning. Have him as a party political campaigner, not in government. Get an actual apex predator to advise him. Starmer has already suffered unnecessary reputational damage, and the task was always going to be tough for any Labour government. But when you're already up against it, the last thing you need is a player who keeps scoring on goals. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.